Hey everyone, Dan Johnston here. I'm the Jack of all Ministries, and today I'm going to give you 5 ways to fail as a pastor in a new church. Now you might be wondering why I'd make a video like this, and the truth is I have seen way too many new senior pastors fail, especially recently, and when I look at some of those situations, I see that there's a lot of commonalities between them. And if I'm totally honest with you, I have been in 3 churches in the last 5 years or so, and I can tell you that I have learned a lot in terms of transitioning out and into new positions. And fortunately, the last time I did it, I think that I did it in a very healthy way, and learning lessons from the other 2 places that I would like to share with you. So whether you are a new senior pastor, whether you're considering becoming one, or you're a church member that's about to receive a new pastor, I think this video could be really helpful for you. As an added benefit, a lot of the things I'm going to talk about in this video apply to non-church settings as well. So if you're coming into a new job, starting a new business or whatever, some of the things that I talk about in this video will also be helpful to you as well. So let's start here with number 5. The first thing I'm going to talk to you about is neglecting the needs of your family. See, when we left North Carolina and came here to Illinois, I didn't realize it, but my son was having a really hard time because he had made some really close friends in North Carolina that he was saying goodbye to. And even though he's been in Illinois for a couple of years, he hasn't really established friendships in that same way. And so there's still kind of this anchor in North Carolina that we really didn't spend a whole lot of time talking to him about. He had been excited about moving to North Carolina. He was excited about coming to Illinois. He's, pretty good at going to new places and starting new, and that really doesn't affect him in a negative way in general. And so I think we kind of just dismissed it and left it alone. My daughter struggled as well because she got into a really exciting, specialty school in North Carolina. And when we got out here to Illinois, there was no school like that around here. And so she just, went to the regular public school. Ultimately now both of them are doing great. My son just graduated high school and he's got a job here in town and he's making friends and things are connecting well, but that's because we've been here more than 2 years now. My daughter has also made a lot of friends, but there were a lot of issues that she was struggling with when we first got here that I didn't even know about. And to be honest with you, I was so focused on my own adjustments and they weren't speaking up, so I just kind of neglected it. And I would highly recommend that you intentionally have conversations with your family as you make a move, particularly if you're going to a new city or a new state, because there is a good reason to leave for your job, your calling. But at the same time, it still affects your family, and so walking with them through that is a very important thing. When I got to my second church in North Carolina, I went there as a youth pastor, and my wife kind of just went along with me. We didn't have a whole lot of conversations about what she really wanted, and really we ended up leaving, and a large part of the reason why was because she really struggled with the culture there, the expectations of her and things like that. And so when I came to Illinois, where I am now, when I interviewed at the church, I made it very clear that you are hiring me, you are not hiring my wife. Any expectations that you put on her are just the same as you would put on any other member of the church. So to be like, oh, well, you're going to head up women's ministry or you're going to play the piano on Sunday morning is completely unfair. And the truth is, if a church is going to put expectations on a pastor's wife, then she should be on the payroll. It's unfair to do that to someone just because they are married to somebody who is coming to serve in a particular capacity. You may disagree with that. Maybe you think that being a pastor's wife does have certain requirements, and that's okay. But that's something that should be a part of the conversation that you have before you come to the church, to lay out right up front what the expectations are of your family, what they are not going to be of your family, and then also making sure you understand their particular struggles. Number 4, giving the right answers in the interview. Now you might be thinking, don't you want to give the right answers in the interview? To some degree that's true, but what's way more important than giving the right answer is to give an honest answer. See, when I moved to North Carolina, I was not honest about, where I was. I wasn't asking probing questions. I wasn't giving answers that, might have been something that made me look like a lower candidate. I wanted to say whatever I felt was going to give me the best chance to get the job. But that's not the best thing to do in a job interview. It's way more important to be honest. When I came to Illinois, I was very honest with the church members that were hiring me. I was transparent about my struggles. I was transparent about expectations I wouldn't be able to meet. I was transparent about expectations I would have of the church. And even though some of those conversations could be a little bit uncomfortable. In the end, it was totally worth it because we knew exactly what we were getting into on both sides. I would ask questions. What is your church not good at? What are some things you'd want to change about the church? What are some things that I'm going to struggle with when I get there? And that was really important. My wife and I, we also snuck up on the church. We didn't tell them we were coming. We were only at the point of the job interview process where I was getting to the actual interviews. I wasn't actually one of the final candidates yet, but it seemed like I was going to move into one of those final candidacy spots. And so my wife and I packed up the car one weekend. We drove up here, snuck up on the church, and got to see what a Sunday morning looked like when nobody knew who I was. There was no, fanfare or, welcome, pastor, or anything like that. We just walked into a regular Sunday morning. Now, it took all of about 30 seconds for some of the people in the back of the church to recognize us from the hiring committee. But the reality is most of the people in the church didn't know. So we got to see the church in the real setting. What do you actually look like on a Sunday morning? And we got to see that. And so that was really helpful for us. Now, you might think that that's, inappropriate or, something that's just not acceptable in society. And that's okay. You don't have to do it. But for me and my wife, I was glad that we were transparent, that we got to see the church in its natural environment, if you will. And in the end, that ended up being a great choice and a great fit for us to end up in Illinois. And we knew that. We were really confident of that going in because we were so honest with them and we allowed them to be honest with us. Number 3, faking it till you don't make it. One of the things that pastors do when they get into a new position is they feel like they have to have all the answers, right? It's like people come up to you and they ask you about processes in the church, they ask you about theology, or they ask you about things that you've never done before, and we feel like we have to have the answers, so we kind of try to BS our way through it. And really, that's a horrible idea because even if you do get away with it a couple of times, more often than not, they're going to be able to tell that you're making this up as you go. And even if you can sneak it by them, you're probably not going to do as good a job with it as you would like to do. And so you're just going to make yourself look more incompetent by trying to lie and make yourself look competent. So it's better if you just are honest and say, I don't know, I've never done that. Ask people for help, get their advice, look to other pastors. There are a ton of places where you can get information from. And it's better just to be honest when you don't know something because it's going to allow people to build up trust in you. They're going to see that you're a human. Too often in our church culture today, we have these pastors, and this is myself included, I'm preaching to myself, that we try to feel like, we try to fill this gap, this void, like we need to be all things to all people, like we need to have all the answers and have everything together when we don't. All of us are fallen sinners, and there's a lot of times where we just don't know what we're doing, and it's better if we're just honest when we don't know. But that doesn't mean that you can't go find the answer. It just means, hey, you know what? I don't have the answer. I'll find it for you. I'll get back to you. And they will appreciate the honesty. They will start to see you as a human being, and they'll relate to you so much better. And honestly, if you're a regular church member watching this and you're thinking about how to respond to these kind of things with your new senior pastor. If you see him struggling with something, lead the conversation with something like, you know what, I don't expect you to know everything because, you just got here. And then ask the question. Give them that freedom to admit when they don't know something. It'll make the conversation go a lot easier and make them feel more comfortable around you as well. Number 2, forgetting that the only new thing is you. There's a church that's very close to me who they just lost their new senior pastor because there was some tension between leadership and him. And one of the issues was he was basically telling everyone, we are like a church plant now. We are starting over. But the reality was there really wasn't a whole lot going on in the church that was new other than him. He thought it was a church plant because he was new, because numbers were kind of down from COVID and things like that. But the reality is, when you looked at all of the leaders and all of the elders, they were all people that had been there for 10 years or more. So the core people that he was working with were not new. So that's very much not a church plant. That's very much an established church when all of your leadership has been there for a decade or more. So it really wasn't a church plant. But see, when you enter a new situation believing that it's like a church plant, your idea is everything is new so I can change everything right now. So you have to remember that when you're coming into something, there are a lot of things that are going to be established that you may not know about. When I first got here to Illinois, one of the things that bothered me was in the parking lot, we had these no skateboarding signs. Now, I grew up in the late '90s, and I would ride my skateboard everywhere. Miles and miles and miles a day on my skateboard constantly. And kids wore these shirts that said skateboarding is not a crime because everywhere you went, security, police, whatever, were kicking you out because you weren't allowed to skateboard anywhere. So I probably had a bias coming into this that, like, mistreating skateboarders, if you will, is something that I just didn't like. But the bigger issue is I didn't like that the first time you pulled into our church parking lot, the first thing you see is a sign telling you what not to do. And so, I was like, I'm going to take those things down. I hate that they're there. I don't like that that's the first thing people see. I don't like the message behind it. And the week that I was going to change it, a guy walked in and he said, "Hey, man, I just wanted to thank you for leaving up those no skateboarding signs." And I was like, "What? Why?" And he said, "Well, my dad used to do concrete work, and the very last job he ever did was the stairs and the sidewalks out there. He finished the job and he passed away a couple weeks later. And when I came back and I saw those kids skateboarding on it and messing it up, it really broke my heart. And so the pastor went up and he put up no skateboarding signs that next day. And I just thought that was such a generous thing for him to do. And now I come in a couple years later and those signs are still up, and you've really taken care of my dad's work. And I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate that." And I was like, "Yeah, no problem." I wouldn't dream of taking those down, right? See, the truth is, I probably still will at some point take those no skateboarding signs down. But the reality is, I didn't look at the history of those signs before I decided to take them down, right? You can't just come in and make a decision assuming that there is not a story behind it. Most things you see in the church when you first come into it, there's going to be history behind it. And you can actually learn that even after you've been at a church for years and years and years. When you meet a person or you're talking to someone and there's a seemingly small issue that they're passionate about, it's usually because there's a backstory behind it. And so it's really important that you remember that you are the only new thing. And when you come in, make sure you understand the stories behind things before you start, making decisions and chopping things and getting rid of them and stuff like that. And that actually leads us into the number one way that you can fail as a new senior pastor in a new church, and that is steering the ship too quickly. I've heard a million stories about people that get their feelings hurt because the new senior pastor comes in and he, starts chopping heads and changes the leadership and brings his own staff in or whatever the case is. And a lot of times people will say, well, that's good because you're coming into a new season, everything's already changing, so take advantage of that and make as many changes as you can and just accept that there's going to be collateral damage. I think that's pretty heartbreaking because every person that leaves because of the pastor coming in and changing things and not listening to them, they experience church hurt, and they'll say, the pastor came in and he didn't care about us. And you know what? They're right. If you're intentionally going in there making decisions knowing that you're going to lose people, when there is a way to do it where you could go slower and get people on board and still make those same changes without losing them, you're choosing option A because it's better for you, because you don't care about their experience. And I wonder how many people there are out there with church hurt that never go back to church, that are completely disheartened with what pastors are doing because of that type of situation. I mean, pastors are constantly changing over. And so it's really important that you steer the ship slowly. That was one thing that my mentor always told me. Someday when you're a senior pastor, make sure that you steer the ship slowly and care about the people. And I think that's really good advice. A friend of mine who's a pastor he just left because of a lot of, there was some tumultuous stuff going on. And basically this is the core reason why. When I talked to him, I found out that he had changed some staff positions. He asked one of them to step down. The other one, he kind of stripped them of their title. He was going to disconnect from their planting organization and then, go with the SBC instead. He was talking about changing the name of the church. He was going to change the Constitution. He was going to change the way a lot of their ministries run. He was replacing almost all of the ministry leaders. I mean, he said, I need to chop everybody and just start over. And the reality is he was given that same advice to steer the ship slowly, and he was making all of those changes, right? I mean, changing the name of the church, changing the Constitution, changing leadership, those are really big changes, and he made all of those changes in 9 months. So if that's steering the ship slowly, I can't imagine what steering it quickly would look like. It's really unhealthy to come into a church and make all those changes right up front. People aren't ready for it. Remember, if you're coming into a new church, odds are they had a senior pastor before that a lot of people loved, that they are now mourning that. And then you come in and want to change everything. It's hard enough to change the person that you are allowing to shepherd you in your life. But it's even more challenging when that change also means all these other changes. And really, as pastors, we should care about the hearts of our people, and we should take our time and do things slowly. It doesn't mean that you can't make changes. It just means make informed decisions. Understand where people are. Give people time to adjust to you. Give people time to trust you. Because if they trust you, if they know you, if you've built relationships with them, then they are going to want to come alongside you and experience those changes with you. It's important to come in and go after that low-hanging fruit first. Let people see that the changes you want to bring are good. Let them trust you, and then they will want to help you carry out the bigger changes when the time comes. So like I said, it doesn't mean you don't make changes. It means don't make all of them at once and do it at the expense of the feelings of the people in your flock. I learned that when I went to North Carolina and I became a youth pastor, they say that it takes about 2 years for your tenure to actually make sense to the people that were with you. I left after 18 months. So I had another 6 months to go, and I probably would have established myself in a way to where things would have started going in a much healthier direction. Now, there were a lot of things about that situation that made it so that I really wasn't a good fit to be there. It wasn't that the church was unhealthy. It wasn't that I was unhealthy. The reality is we just weren't a good fit, and we didn't take the steps at the beginning to learn what that meant. But I think that if we both had gone into it being more patient with each other, willing to cooperate and adjust together, and if I would have put the full 2 years in, I think things would have been a lot different. They say that for senior pastors, it's a little bit longer. It usually takes about 7 years for a senior pastor to fully establish his tenure. And I think the average length of a senior pastor in a church is about 5 years. So what that means is most pastors quit before they cross the line to where their tenures are established. So we have a lot of pastors that bounce from place to place to place that never actually get to establish themselves, and that's why they don't find that ministerial success. Now, those are just statistics. That doesn't mean that the Holy Spirit doesn't work one way in a church with certain people and a different way with other people. I don't think we can put God in a box. But I do think that it speaks to humanity, and that we as leaders, we want to come in, we want to change things, we want it to be our way, and we want to have successful, thriving ministries right from the get-go. But when it comes to investing and taking our time, we get really impatient. And if you're a member of a church, remember that there's a guy coming in here who has a lot of weight to carry on his shoulders, right? Now, in reality, he should be casting that off to the Lord, because that's who's really responsible. But any pastor that cares about you is going to feel the weight of your burdens. He's going to feel the weight of your struggles and your desires and the gaps that exist between you and your relationship with God. He's going to want to celebrate the victories. He's going to want to celebrate the changes in your life and what God has done for you. And so that's a really important position. So that is something that is going to take time to establish. So don't enter your situation with a critical eye, trying to find things that he's doing wrong, trying to not cooperate with them, or to even be proud, as I've heard a lot of churches are proud to have pastors leave early because they're such a difficult congregation to deal with. Just remember that this is something that takes time to establish. So make sure that you give your full effort and allow that time to set in. And I promise you that your ministry will be successful if you allow God to take his time and cultivate something rather than just trying to harvest something as soon as it sprouts. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. I hope that it was helpful to you, whether you are a senior pastor heading to a new church, or you're considering applying at a church, or you are a church member who is looking forward to having a new pastor come in. If it was helpful to you, I'd appreciate it if you'd consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel, because this is the kind of stuff that I love to tackle. And with that, I hope that you have a great day, and I will see you on the next video.